The pass at Thermopylae was narrow, so narrow a man could stretch out his arms and touch stone on either side. The cliffs to the right fell straight to the sea, and to the left rose jagged mountains, their shadows darkening the land even in daylight. It was here, between salt and stone, that 300 Spartans took their stand. Not for glory, not for conquest, but because no one else could hold the line. Leonidas, their king, did not speak of victory. He spoke of duty, of time, of what it meant to be human in the face of overwhelming force. Xerxes, king of kings, ruler of Persia, had brought an army like the world had never seen. Historians would argue the numbers, but all agreed it was vast. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers from dozens of nations, each bound by tribute or fear. They carried polished armor, golden trappings, silk banners, and arrows enough to blot out the sun. Against that tide stood farmers, potters, blacksmiths, and warriors. Not just Spartans. There were Thespians, Thebans, Arcadians, men from city-states that often hated one another. But in Thermopylae, they stood shoulder to shoulder. They knew they would die, and they stood anyway. Because someone had to say no. Leonidas had received the oracle's prophecy before leaving Sparta. She had whispered, as if trying to escape fate's notice, that either a Spartan king must die, or all of Greece would fall. He did not flinch. He told no one of the burden, he simply chose. His men followed not because they were ordered, but because they understood. Spartan boys were raised not to fear death, but to greet it with readiness. Yet even so, none marched for death. They marched for time. Time for the Greek cities to unite. Time for reinforcements to gather. Time for hope to form from strategy. The Persian envoys came first, before the arrows. They offered terms: land, gold, survival. Leonidas listened. Then he said calmly, "Come and take them." When told the Persian arrows would blot out the sun, a Spartan replied, "Then we shall fight in the shade." These were not boasts. They were facts. The Spartans did not wear fear. They wore red cloaks to hide blood. They did not carry shields for themselves. They carried them to protect the man beside them. At Thermopylae, they formed a wall, shield pressed to shield, spear resting over arm. When the Persian wave crashed upon them, it broke. Again and again, the enemy charged, Persian nobles in gold, slave conscripts with terror in their eyes, immortals who had never tasted defeat. But the Spartans held. The narrow pass made numbers meaningless. 10 men could not strike where only 2 could stand. The Persians pushed with weight. The Spartans answered with discipline. They knew when to yield a step, when to thrust high low through the thigh. When a man fell, another filled the gap before his body hit the earth. The allies beside them bled too, Thespians who refused to leave, even when told they could. Arcadians who'd never held a spear before, now fighting like veterans. The dead piled into the cliffs. The sea turned red. For 2 days, the Persians could not pass. Xerxes watched from a golden throne, fury growing with each failed assault. He had believed his empire unbreakable, that a small Greek force would crumble. Instead, he saw his men hesitate before charging farmers with spears. Then came betrayal. A Greek named Ephialtes showed the Persians a mountain goat path, a way around the cliffs, to flank the Spartans from behind. When Leonidas learned of it, he did not curse the traitor, he gathered his men. He released the allies, telling them their part was done. Many left, but some stayed. The 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, a few hundred others, they all knew what was coming. And they chose to remain. They made their peace without ceremony. No farewell letters, no begging the gods. Just preparation. They repaired armor, sharpened blades, stood silently in the dark. When dawn came, they stood in the open, not behind the pass, but on flat ground. They formed ranks and met the Persian tide from both sides. This was no longer strategy. It was defiance. They did not die quickly. They fought. They tore through men in armor worth more than their homes. They forced immortals to step over their own dead. They fought even when arrows blackened the air and swords shattered on shields. Leonidas fell, his body pierced but unbowed. His men rallied around it, not to save him, but to ensure the Persians would never forget. In the end, they were surrounded. Spears broken, swords lost, they fought with teeth and hands. And then they died. Not all at once, but one by one, each man making his own stand. When it was over, Xerxes surveyed the field. He had the body of Leonidas beheaded. But he had not won. The Greeks heard what had happened. The courage, the resistance, the sacrifice, it spread like wildfire. Athens prepared its fleet. Sparta sent more soldiers. The cities that bickered began to unify. The Persian advance stalled, then shattered. The war would be long. But it would be fought by people who now believed that courage could beat numbers, that humanity's spirit was not counted in legions. The 300 were gone, but their stand echoed through every sword that followed. They bought time, not just for Greece, but for all who believed in freedom. No divine favor shielded them. No prophecy saved them. They stood, fully human, facing death not with the hope of survival, but with the certainty that standing mattered. They were not martyrs, they were a wall, built from flesh, blood, and unbreakable will. And that wall held.